We're going to be talking about the Board of Supervisors. They are going to meet today, as they do often on Tuesdays. But on the agenda, a very important topic here, a proposal to end county facility access for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, their firearms training. Right now, ICE has access to use the San Diego Regional Firearms Training Center in Otay Mesa. In fact, this is an issue that we've seen crop up not just in the county of San Diego, but there have been critics of federal agents, particularly when it comes to Customs and Border Protection as well as ICE, using regional firearms training centers, not just here. But today we're talking about the county. Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer and Paloma Aguirre want to stop this and say this is more than just a training facility, and it's about trust.
Because the federal government cannot terrorize our families all week and rent our firing range on the weekend. Not on this county, not anymore.
Our local public facilities should serve our residents.
Yeah, and so Lawson-Remer and Aguirre, in a letter to the County Board of Supervisors, they wrote this out. They detailed the reason why they feel that this is important now, because as we will detail to you, this has been an agreement and an understanding that has been going on for several years. In this letter, Lawson-Remer and Aguirre, and this is in a letter to the County Board of Supervisors, they say, quote, across San Diego County, families are afraid to seek help from the very public institutions meant to protect them. Parents worry that taking a child to school, reporting a crime, or showing up for a medical appointment could expose a loved one to immigration enforcement. Now, we're going to dive into what exactly this agreement is and how it is that it came to be and what it actually says, as well as more details from this letter. So in May, we heard from Congressman Mike Levin, who released a letter by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, otherwise known as ICE, highlighting the impact of President Trump's immigration agenda in San Diego.
Yeah, this is something that we've covered here before back in May when it came through, and what it really was a snapshot, a never before really seen snapshot of just how far this immigration enforcement agenda has extended here in the county itself. So one of the big numbers here is over 16,000. That has been the amount of undocumented immigrants that have either been detained or removed from the United States, specifically in this county here, the highest share of removals, that being from Mexico, Guatemala, and Venezuela. An interesting thing here, and I think that this helps set the stage for what has already been known here in San Diego and among other states and counties here that lean on the more Democratic side, is that there is a overwhelming sense of a lack of accountability. There is an overwhelming sense of a lack of transparency about these ICE operations. This is what you hear a representative like Mike Levin say. That's what you hear certain Democratic Board of Supervisors, city council members say here in San Diego and California and throughout the country.
Yeah, this is an issue we saw crop up with Escondido. That's what if you notice me looking over here to the I believe this is to the right of the screen. That's me looking at my laptop here, and I was pulling up that one of the most recent ones that we understand that was going on, because ICE obviously has presence throughout the county, throughout the nation, and being a border town that makes sense. However, this is not the first time that we've heard backlash to ICE using either state, city, and or county shooting range facilities, training facilities of all kinds. And I was trying to find the most recent example of that, and that was Escondido, which did receive a fair amount of backlash for the agreement that was put in place to allow ICE agents to use its outdoor firing range that's located on Valley Center Road. We are talking, though, about the county facilities that are in a couple of different locations that we'll get to here in just a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the things that Representative Levin also asked for were criminal records for detainees. That was not something that ICE provided in this letter. Essentially, their contention there is we have the legal authority to detain and remove all undocumented immigrants, regardless of whether or not they have an otherwise clean criminal record or not. Their contention is that being in the country illegally is the criminal record. So that's something that we heard Representative Levin take aim at the agency for, but that's a contention of ICE as well. So that was information that he sought but was not able to get from ICE.
And that's been sort of the prepackaged explanation that the Trump administration has given, because they did promise mass deportations during the campaign. They seemingly singled out those who they believe were here, were committing crimes, had already been deported, came back again, continued to commit crimes. If you think back to Laken Riley, of course, the young girl in Georgia who was killed by an undocumented immigrant who had, I believe, had already been previously deported. That was oftentimes used as an example during the campaign trail. Many people remember Marjorie Taylor Greene standing up in front of, I believe it was the State of the Union address by Joe Biden, who was then president, saying, "Say her name." That is oftentimes used as the example. But the Trump administration now, when a local as well as congressional leaders have been asking for evidence of these individuals that are being deported en masse, what is that their criminal violation is, oftentimes you will hear simply being here undocumented is a criminal violation. However, it should be pointed out that's actually a civil violation. It is not a criminal violation. It's not it wouldn't be considered to be, I believe the highest extent to it is a misdemeanor. It's a civil infraction. However, of course, there has been a growing voice asking for, of those who have been deported since Trump administration restarted here in 2024, how many of these individuals are actual criminals? And that is something that Mike Levin was trying to determine.
And a lot of that has to do with times in which the Trump administration has given a justification of a criminal history, and it's later been proved not to pass the smell test. You know, we think of Kilmar Abrego Garcia was an instance where once you started to get more information as to what the agency and what immigration enforcement was doing to determine whether or not certain individuals were MS-13 gang members, we remember that photo of the tattoo that had superimposed symbols of an M and an S and a 1 and a 3 to attempt to make a connection between the tattoos that he had on his fingers to potential
Well, there was
gang
like the photoshopped. It was like, this is what we think this says. And
it was
President
a graphic,
Trump was, displaying it as if that's what the tattoo, if that's what was real.
Yes, but you know, I digress.
Yes,
that's a little outside of the realm of the conversation we're having, but nonetheless, that is something that has been a sticking point for people who are against this immigration agenda. Two of them happen to be Board of Supervisors here that we're going to be speaking of today. So let's get back to this facility in particular. This is a county-owned firearms training facility. It's been around for 30 years now. It was built in 1996, and an agreement signed in July of 2021 between the county and and ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, allowed them to do enforcement and removal. They allowed them to use the facility for firearms training. Now, this isn't the only immigration enforcement related agency that has a contract with the Otay Mesa facility in particular. 4 years prior to that agreement, in 2017, there was a similar contract that was reached with Customs and Border Protection, otherwise known as CBP, that allowed them to do the exact same thing. So what we'll hear here is that the way in which this was approved was done so in such a way that the Board of Supervisors did not really necessarily need to be in the loop on this in particular. There are certain machinations that go on in county policy. A lot of it has to do with the duration of a lease, the price tag of a lease, to where it doesn't reach a threshold to where this needs to be brought to the broader board in particular and make a vote here.
And that's raised in the letter that was sent by Supervisors Tara Lawson-Remer and Paloma Aguirre. In fact, it says, quote, "The agreement was small enough to be signed administratively, meaning this board and the public never had an opportunity to weigh in before ICE, and CBP began training on county property. This is not how county property should be used." Now, it should be noted, the ICE agreement was signed in 2021. That was under the Biden administration. 2017, that was under the first Trump administration. And again, while things can be signed administratively, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is being done behind closed doors, unbeknownst to the supervisors. Because I don't want this to come off as if the supervisors are claiming that this was done, as some sort of like backroom deal. We'll get into the machinations, as you said, about what the threshold is for this to be brought up in a public setting, meaning that supervisors are able to comment publicly, because that does make a big difference. If you are able to vote on something, you have a record of how it is that you would vote on this. Despite whatever administration is entering an agreement with the County Board of Supervisors. And I believe that that's sort of the point that they are making, is that while this may have been known amongst county staff and supervisor and county staff and those who worked on this agreement, it was not something that was brought before a meeting.
Yeah. So and to
Like the one that we have going on today.
Yeah, the one that's going on right now. Actually, I was taking a look at it. It's lower in the agenda, so I do not expect any updates as to what those conversations look like while we're on air and discussing this. At least while we're discussing this, but you mentioned, we'll go a little bit in more detail. What they're referring to is San Diego County Administrative Code Section 73.2B2. Essentially what that says is short-term leases of county property can be negotiated and authorized by only the Director of General Services in a very certain circumstance. That being, the agreement is 10 years or less and has a monthly rent of $25,000 or less. So anything, a 9-year, $24,000 a month lease does not meet that threshold to where it has to go to the board. So, we don't have the exact details of what the lease is, the exact dollar amount, but we do know that it's less than 10 years and the monthly rent is less than $25,000 a month, because otherwise it would have to go to the board for that full vote. So, of course, that means that is, to describe it how we saw from in this letter, it was, quote, executed administratively. So Lawson Remer and Aguirre say that these agreements were only made public just a few months ago in April of 2026. This is their assertion in an investigative report by iNews Source. That's 5 years after the ICE agreement and 9 years after the agreement with Customs and Border Protection. That meaning that this Customs and Border Protection agreement could very well be on its last month or its last 11 months.
Yeah.
We're not entirely sure. So that one could be over anyways here. We don't know, but we also don't know if there's current negotiations to continue that. There's still a lot of unknowns on that. But in the time since 2024 alone, both of these agencies have logged over 3,300 hours training with firearms there.
Yeah, and it should be noted that the last agreement, at least in 2021, Supervisor Tara Lawson Remer was the only one who was still serving on the board, of those between us. I shouldn't say that, because Jim Desmond and there were other members on the board, but of the two who are bringing this issue up, I should say, Supervisor Tara Lawson Remer is the one who was on the board. Paloma Aguirre was not on the board at that time. I can't actually remember if she was serving in city council, but I don't remember if she was mayor yet or just a city council member at that time. Serge Dedina, that may have been his last year, but nonetheless, Tara Lawson Remer was on the board in 2021 when that last agreement was entered into with ICE.
So to continue on the letter, what are they asking? On the agenda, you're going to see there that they're going to ask the chief administrative officer to terminate these 3 separate license agreements. Of course, 2021 agreement with ICE, 2017 agreement with Customs and Border Protection, a separate third one as well. That's a 2022 agreement with ICE to use the Miramar training facility at the Miramar Marine Corps Air Base. So a lot of attention in this letter is directed specifically at the Otay Mesa training facility. But when it comes to the demands that they are asking here and they're putting into the agenda minutes today, there's actually going to be that third one as well. They say that the supervisors have administrative authority to change these contracts because they go through the county's Department of General Services rather than the Sheriff's Department.
Right.
So in terms of the legality and the local impacts, because for any of you guys who either watch our show or you've watched, well prior, because, we're still only just a few months in, a lot of the reporting in the beginning of the Trump administration and some of the months preceding the start of this show and this extended coverage that we do, you'll know that the county has taken a lot of steps to curb the amount of cooperation they can conduct with, immigration enforcement between the city and ICE, between the county and ICE. It's not just the county of San Diego who's doing this. You're seeing this all over. We're going to focus on the county specifically here. So in 2024, the county instituted what is called L2 policies. And that limits the use of county resources for civil immigration enforcement, and it limits county cooperation. Now, what is interesting here, and I'll let you explain why, is that in this letter, Lawson Remer and Aguirre concede that the use of these training facilities is not a violation of these policies that have been in place for just about 18 months now.
Yeah, and that's because there's no actual immigration enforcement taking place at these facilities. They are training their firearms. They are training anybody who is in law enforcement. I believe it's a requirement to undergo, whether that's federal, local, statewide, you are required, even if you never use your firearm, to constantly undergo training so that if and when you do have to use your firearm, you are trained at the best of your ability. But because there's no actual immigration enforcement taking place at these facilities, it doesn't rise to the level, so to speak, of violating the county's own regulations that they have put into place.
No
Correct.
check-in
Exactly.
hearings, none of that.
A lot of what was put into place with a variety of these, because I've reported on this, is essentially safeguards. There was obviously a very public back and forth between the county board of supervisors and the Sheriff Kelly Martinez, over whether or not the jails, for instance, would sort of like, if they get somebody in custody, they find out that he is not a documented immigrant and or a U.S. citizen. There was a huge fight over whether or not the sheriffs would cooperate with immigration authorities. Then you get to the county resource building. So anything that could be like a distribution for CalFresh checks or, different type of legal services or just, different type of county resources. Would those buildings allow for ICE agents to apprehend an individual inside of those buildings? Those were all the things that were sort of safeguarded, if you will, by this group of board of supervisors. However, again, because this is a firearm trainings only, there are no immigration enforcement tactics taking place, they say, again, and they admit in this letter, does not rise to the level of violating our L2s, but they do contend that the legalities pale in comparison to public perception. They are openly admitting that, again, a lot of this has to do with public perception and the sort of appearance of the county putting into place a lot of these protections for residents of the county who may be undocumented, while then also allowing for Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, as well as CBP, to use county facilities. In fact, saying, quote, a distinction that means little to families who see county resources prop up the same agencies, inciting fear throughout our neighborhoods.
So, yeah, it's
a distinction that they admit to.
Yeah, it's a distinction that they admit to, and in terms of where they stand in regards to the immigration enforcement that's been going on in the second Trump administration, it's an attempt, it's a pledge to remain consistent in that.
Yes.
I think is a good way to describe it to a constituency that they believe really shares these opinions. So going into some of the other details in terms of fiscal impact, business impact, et cetera, the letter estimates that terminating this agreement would mainly impact the fiscal year operational plan in the sheriff's office, not just this year, the 2026 to 2027 fiscal year, and the years beyond. They're estimating a loss of $126,000, nearly $127,000 annually. That's over $10,000 a year from the ICE agreement and $116,000 from Customs and Border Patrol. They say that the termination would not impact the net general fund costs. So they, in terms of what is this going to mean, we've had a lot of conversation about the deficit. They say that this is separate from that. This is not going to be something that affects perhaps the next budget from Mayor Todd Gloria in January, as we start to see, perhaps maybe some less money that comes in this year as it does next year in a hypothetical situation, of course.
Yeah, and look, the county with their own budget and their own budget constraints, regardless of what it is that they go ahead and pass. I mean, we're talking, this is conceivably peanuts when we're talking about any municipality's budget, $126,000 and then $10,000, a total, like you said, $126,000. This would be peanuts really in any municipality government. That's not to say that money does not matter. However, they do try to justify this by saying that there are potential losses in economics of a county when you have strict immigration enforcement going on. In fact, they cite a May 2026 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research. It finds that one U.S.-born male worker loses their job for every 6 undocumented workers who leave the workforce due to heightened ICE activity. Sectors mentioned include construction and agriculture, which, of course, are large parts of our local economy.
So, we're going to get a vote here.
Yeah, we will.
In just a little bit. Something that we do want to mention here before we put a button on it and we, take a break here is what the letter does not propose.
Yeah.
And I think this is a big thing, and I think it's crucial that we mention it here because the ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, in certain cases, I think it's fair to say that they serve in an essential process here in San Diego and for the United States, which is, we do have a closed border. This is something that the administration wants to uphold. They're going to be here. So I think it's important to mention, if we are seeing a proposal that seeks to terminate leases of firearm training facilities, what is there a backup plan? Are they encouraging them to lease with a private training facility? This is something that we don't see here in this letter. Perhaps this is something that they don't believe it is the county's responsibility to find that alternate location. But I do want to point here to a portion of this letter where it says, quote, rising enforcement operations and the fear that comes with them have eroded trust in all levels of government. Since the start of the second Trump administration, there have been at least 41 separate shooting incidents resulting in 11 fatalities carried out by federal immigration agents during the mass deportation campaign. What I think is just important to mention here is that this letter at the same time is requesting to take away the leases for firearm training facilities.
Right.
So it does present a potential risk here, whereas we have already seen troves of reporting about the recruitment tactics of ICE and of Customs and Border Protection in the second Trump administration. There's been reporting that it is a open net that they are casting, essentially, trying to get as many because they have promised the largest
money.
mass deportation. You've mentioned those $50,000 bonuses. We've seen people who have gone undercover and have applied for ICE, and they have detailed through their reporting how easy that process is. You know, so the layers that could be poked by critics and be further scrutinized are
and we want to bring
wide
this
open.
up, and we want to bring this up too because we have not heard a response from ICE, and so we do not want to present this story with only the opinion of two supervisors who are pushing for this move. And will, by the way, in all likelihood, get this because right now the makeup of the board is a 3-2 split amongst Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah,
So,
unless we see, that a third Democrat there change over. So
that being Monica Montgomery Stepp, who was not a part of the letter. But still, nonetheless, if it's a 3-2 vote, a 4-1 vote, this does seem all but certain to go ahead and pass. That does not mean, by the way, that this will terminate the lease. They're asking the county administrative officer to look into terminating the leases to see if it is legally possible. But nonetheless, let's get back to sort of the other opinion of this, or at least to try to present what could be the other side, so to speak.
Essentially that being is, this is an agency that has already been under intense scrutiny for its tactics and its hiring practices. Perhaps maybe, a potentially troubling further development would be terminating a contract that trains the use of firearms. So this is going to be one of those questions, and of course we're strictly talking in hypotheticals right now, but it is going to raise that question of if these are leases that are terminated for ICE and for Customs and Border Patrol here in San Diego, where do they go to further train their officers to conduct these immigration enforcement operations, which, albeit we are seeing the reporting, we're hearing from local leaders, we're hearing from local lawmakers how much they protest those operations. We do know that there is jurisdiction for them to do it to a certain extent here. We know that it's complicated. We know that the county has taken steps to limit what that looks like. But nonetheless, this is a federal, immigration enforcement agency.
And mind you, two things that I do want to point out is that oftentimes at these shooting ranges, it's not even that they are conducting immigration enforcement operations. They're practicing basic gun safety. Again, a lot of these enforcement agencies have requirements to log certain hours. Those requirements aren't going to go away. But I venture to guess that there might be if they are unable to acquiesce a training facility, if all of these training facilities seemingly turn them away, they all of a sudden are not going to carry their firearms anymore, and the possibility for a shooting does not go down. They will continue to be armed unless there is a change at the federal level. And that would likely take a full takeover of all three branches of government for that to happen. So, again, I think it's a good hypothetical question to ask. Are you increasing safety by removing these training facilities? Or are we potentially making it that we have still armed immigration officers on the streets conducting these operations with now less training under their belt?
That is
I think it's a valid question.
And that's a question we almost assuredly will expect these county supervisors to have
address,
here in just a few minutes. We know that our Tori Apodaca has been covering this all morning. We had some reporting yesterday on it. I just wanted to check really quick to make sure that when we're teasing future programming, we're giving you the correct information. We know that Tori is still covering this throughout our midday shows. That's going to be our 11 o'clock hour. That's going to be our noon hour. So if we do get a decision there, she is going to be the first person to bring that your way here on our airwaves, on our stream, et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is happening today. So if this is something that you guys are interested in and you want to see what happens next, we could be getting that answer very shortly now. So just make sure you stay tuned in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.